She's a woman of all seasons, a vessel of strength, honor and dignity. She's a woman, yes, a woman, of all seasons.
Welcome back, girls. As I said earlier, today we're laying a foundation of those 7 P's I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to only deal with 2 today. An overview of the 2 P's. The first one, your person and your purpose. And in a later episode, we'll deal with the other P's as we go along. So let's look at your person. Now, when we talk of your person, we're talking of the passwords. Let's talk of 7 passwords to your self-identity. What are these? There are many, but I've picked 7 of them. Namely, your choices. Your choices do define you. So you need to be very careful what choices you make, whether good or bad, because your choices are who you are. You are your choices. So your choices is one of the things that defines you, but you're not defined by your failures subsequent to those choices. You must remember that. The choices you make will define you, but if you make mistakes out of those choices, those mistakes should not define you, because you can get up and rebrand yourself and redeem yourself and move on with your journey to destiny. Another password to your destiny is your hallmarks, but not your fallmarks. Your hallmarks, what are your hallmarks? Your hallmarks are traits. These are things such as the quality in you that makes you a game changer. You get into a situation and immediately you change the game in that situation. A trend setter. You set the trend in that situation. Or you're a pioneer. You are the first among others to venture into a particular area. These are what are your hallmarks. Things by which you're defined. Let's say somebody like Wangari Maathai. What she did, she was the first among many to venture into the issue of environment in Kenya. And to that extent, she was a trendsetter, a game changer, a pioneer. And but you're not defined by your fallmarks. Your fallmarks are things that happened in your life that devastate and they push you back and they almost destroy you. You're not defined by that because there's a chance to get up and move on. Now, the other thing that defines you are your positive selves, but not your negative selves. An example of a positive self is self-esteem. High self-esteem, a healthy self-esteem, but a low or a negative self-esteem definitely should not define you because you have the power to change it. The other thing is your future defines you, not your past. Your future is where you're headed in terms of your destiny. So that will definitely define you because you're headed towards a destination for which you are called and ordained. But your past, the past pain, the past woundedness, your past failures, those do not define you and they should not define you. And we'll talk more about all this in later episodes. Your wells of wellness define you, whether it is emotionally, mentally, spiritually, intellectually, physically, wells of wellness, where you develop an all-round wellness in every area of your life. Those will define you. But what doesn't define you are your pits of abuse. Each seasoned woman has a story to tell about some kind of abuse she's been through in her life, whether as a young girl or as she matured into a woman. Emotional abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse even in our churches, and abuse such as physical abuse. These are pits of abuse, things that break your spirit. And we're going to talk about antidotes to a broken spirit to show you that you're not defined by the pits of abuse that you may have gone through, but you are defined by your wells of wellness, which you have the power to create and to fill. Now, the other thing that does define you is your personal mission statement. As I said earlier, you're the one to decide, what are my core values? What are my ethics? And you come up with a personal mission statement. Now, those mission statements will define you because we'll know you by them and will define you by them. You'll define yourself by them. And of course, your purpose will define you, not your poise. Poise is masquerading, almost poising, but not really purposing, not really fulfilling a purpose, but just parading as if you're fulfilling a purpose which you're not. So your purpose, your real purpose for which you are called, does define you. But your poise or your fakeness doesn't define you in any way. Also, when we talk about your purpose, your person, we're talking of the decades, and I've chosen 7 decades. We talk of your trendy 20s. Those define you. And I talk of dancing through your 7 decades without allowing those decades to distort your true identity. We'll talk about your trendy 20s. We'll talk about your thriving 30s, your fortified 40s, your feisty 50s, your sexy 60s, your serene 70s when you're calm and serene, your elegant 80s, and of course your noble 90s when you're noble and you've come to the end of your journey and you can point and say, I have run the good race, I have finished the race. When we're talking about your person, we're talking of different women within you. In each one of us, there is 7 types of women within us, and their nemesis. And it is for you to decide which woman you will allow to come out strongly and which woman you will silence. There's an Esther who is a trendsetter, a woman who knows why she's in a particular place at a particular time. Whereas there's a Vashti, a woman who is in a privileged place, but doesn't know the purpose for which she has been put in a privileged place. So she misses it and aborts her purpose. There is a Ruth and an Orpah. A Ruth is one who lays hold of destiny. She sees the way forward, she sees who to connect with, and she purposes to move on to a brighter future, away from a place of death to a place of life. Whereas an Orpah is too timid and scared to take that step of faith, and she chooses to remain in a place of death, like Moab. You remember in the book of Ruth, Naomi was taking her daughters-in-law to Bethlehem, and Orpah chose to remain in the place of death, which was Moab. Within you, there is a Rahab or a Delilah. You need to choose which you want to come out stronger. Is it the Rahab or the Delilah? Both were prostitutes. Both had a past. But Rahab chose not to be defined by her past. And she chose to connect with the people of God, the people of destiny, and to move on and relocate from her past and from her dysfunction or trade and become a woman in the Bible who's recognized for having saved the spies who had come to spy the land. And she helped the people of God. Whereas Delilah destroyed a man of God. So you want to make up your mind whether you want to be a Delilah who pulls down and brings down the men of God with her behavior, or a Rahab who sees a moment of relocating from her place of dysfunction and moves on to a place where she makes her destiny. Are you an Abigail or a Michal? Abigail met David in the wilderness when her husband Nabal had refused to help David. And Abigail chose to connect with David because she could see that David was a new move of God. And she chose destiny. She chose to be positive and move on with what God was working with. But Michal, and in the end, Abigail actually was married by David and she became very effective. But Michal was another of David's wives who despised him because he was dancing for the Lord. Now, a Michal is one who does not recognize that she's connected to a nation shaker, a city shaker, a trendsetter, and a move of God. And she mocked him, and at the end of the day, she missed it, and she missed her destiny, and she became barren, basically. Do you want to be a Naomi or do you want to be a Rebecca? A Naomi is a mentor, a woman who discerns that she has in her care young women who need to enter their destiny and who need to be guided on how to position themselves on the threshing floor. She guided Ruth specifically until Ruth was able to lay hold of her Boaz. But when you come to Rebecca, the mother of Jacob and Esau, she wasn't a good mentor. She actually taught her sons to be rivals. She favored one over the other, and in the process, she made them fight and despise one another. And she made Esau miss his destiny at the end of the day. So you want to be a Naomi who's a mentor and not a Rebecca who causes strife between the younger generation. Do you want to be a Hannah or a Peninnah? A Hannah is a woman who carries destinies in her wombs. When she's barren, she knows where to go in order to break her barrenness. She ignores her mockers and she presses into and she seeks the God who can break her barrenness. But a Penina mocks women like Hannah. You don't want to be a Penina who mocks other women in their dry seasons and their barren seasons. You want to be a Hannah who ignores the mockers, presses into God, and in the process of pressing into God, her barrenness is broken, and she births prophets, and she births moves of God and nation shakers. And finally, do you want to be a Martha or a Mary? A Martha, these were two sisters. One chose to be caught up in the mundane things of life, whereas the other one discerned that she was in the presence of Jesus, the destiny maker, and she wanted to receive and get an impartation from everything Jesus could give her so that she could move on. Whereas Martha was so busy with the mundane. Do not be a woman who is so busy with the mundane things of life. Just because you're married, you make your children the center of your life. Your husband is the center of your life. And you forget that you have a God-ordained destiny to fulfill. God is not a God of confusion. In giving us marriages and giving us children, he knows he gives us the grace to handle all and to balance all.